know about you, but I like to keep my expenses as low as humanly possible. It gets hot in Texas, and personally, I don't want to be stressed out about the thought of having a 20-year-old HVAC system kicking the bucket and me getting slapped on an $8,000 expense that I did not plan for. This is the most powerful and the most misunderstood. A 2-1 interest rate is the most common buy down, and it is the temporary financing strategy where the buyer's mortgage rate is reduced for the first 2 years of the loan. This is critical to understand, and the way that I explain this to my clients, the lender calculation on payment difference, the reduced rate 4.5 to 5.5%, and the full note rate is 6.5%. That difference is prepaid upfront and held in an escrow account. Each month, that account subsidizes the buyer's payment. So the buyer is still qualified at the full note rate. The loan itself is still written at 6.5%, but the buy down is just a temporary payment subsidy. This is beneficial if you're in a position where you just got into your starter position for your future career. You know the likelihood of your pay structure going down is pretty low, so if you're going to get a predictable, realistic, substantial raise in the semi-immediate future, this is a great option to explore. Good example for this is Houston law enforcement officers just got a nice pay raise. They knew about 10 months in advance that this was going to be approved and it was going to happen, so we got flooded with law enforcement officers buying houses that they were nervous that was going to be above their budget, but they were using this method because they knew more money was on the horizon, so they were able to get the house sooner, which means on paper they got a better deal because the appreciation wasn't a factor here. A permanent interest rate buy down is when the buyer pays upfront fees. These are called discount points, and they lower the interest rate for the entire life of the loan, not just temporary like a 2-1. How these discount points work: 1 point equals 1% of the loan amount. Typically reduces the rate by about a quarter point, 0.25%. Now, where the permanent buy down makes sense is if you plan on holding on to the property for more than 5 years. If you just got engaged or married, first off, congratulations. But if you as a couple are starting to discuss kids and you can only afford to get into your 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom starter home right now, which the majority of people start out this way. But if you are going to want the 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath in time, this probably isn't the best way to utilize the cash. If the rates are relatively high, this is another thing that makes sense in my professional opinion. I think rates are pretty stabilized right now. Yes, we have some potential volatility with what's going on overseas, but I think 5.5% is about the lowest that we will probably see them get for the foreseeable future. If you want long-term payment stability, it is another thing to think about, keeping your monthly expenses as low as possible. This helps out too because when taxes and insurance goes up, you are still going to be better off. Another way that this is beneficial is if you look at what you're going to pay over the span of the life of the loan. If you've never looked at an amortization table, it is kind of gross on what you actually pay on the house over the course of the life of that loan. This is why people try to pay off their mortgage as quickly as possible. This is why people try to pay all their debt off as quickly as possible.